Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this third talk of the European Space Agency's Climate Change Initiative webinar series. Thanks a lot for joining us. So as part of the ESA CCI's program, Knowledge Exchange Activities, we launched a webinar series that is titled Monitoring Climate Change from Space. The aim is to highlight how CCI ECV's data are created and how they can be leveraged to monitor climate change and drive climate action. So this is a recurring monthly series. It's happening every second to last Wednesday of the month at 4 p.m. Central European Time. So if you missed past webinars or you would like to rewatch them, you can have a look at the project website at climate.esa.int. It also includes the list of all our upcoming webinars until September. So if we go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, the ESA CCI is a major research effort to generate global decades-long satellite data records to track and understand key aspects of the Earth's climate system. So these data sets are known as essential climate variables, or ECVs. And actually, since the establishment of the ESA CCI's program in 2008, there are now 27 satellite-derived ESA CCI ECVs, as well as several cross-ECVs projects, which are all open source and available on the website, so climate.esa.int. And so today, in this webinar, we will be focusing on ESA CCI's Vegetation Parameters project. And so for this, we are very happy to be joined by Christiaan van der Tol, who is an associate professor in ecohydrology and Earth observation at the Water Resources Department at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. And he is the science leader of the Vegetation Parameters CCI project. His research focuses on the role of plants, the energy, water, and carbon cycles on Earth. And he will give us an introduction on how satellite data can be used to monitor vegetation from space, how long-term time series of vegetation parameters are built, and what makes the CCI vegetation dataset unique, and of course, how you can use it in your own research, because it's all open source. So we encourage you to ask questions throughout this session, so please feel free to post them in the chat. There's also a Q&A box below, and we will take all questions at the end. So without further ado, Christiaan, I'll stop sharing and hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina, for this very complete introduction. And thank you for having me in this interesting webinar series. And also the timing is quite nice because we just released a new data set and it came out last weekend, or actually yesterday. We checked that everything is working. So we have now access to the data that I'm going to show you in this talk. Thank you for the Knowledge Exchange team to make this possible, and also for Alistair Waterfall for providing the data, and even before this webinar of today. Yes, my name is Christiaan van der Tol, and so we have been working for a few years on essential climate variable dataset for vegetation. So for today, I have set two goals. If we can move to the next slide, it doesn't work. Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to give you a little bit of insight in what we have been doing, what is inside the dataset that I'm going to show you, give you a little bit of below the hood without going into many technical details. So the other thing that we have noticed when we started with this requirements study, and we see what people actually need when they, what actually makes them decide whether to use a certain data set or not, it's not only the quality of the data, but what is very important is the accessibility and user friendliness of the data. So my goal for today is actually to lower the threshold of using this data set. So because we spent some effort and invested some time in making the dataset available or producing the dataset. Also, the member state, they pay for it, and so the taxpayer pays for it. And it's so for us, it would be very valuable if the data are eventually used in your scientific studies. So we hope that after today, you are actually able to actually interested and enthusiastic about trying the data set out. The fact that you joined today, to me, already means that you don't need much convincing about the importance of the relevance of climate data records of vegetation. But just to give a little bit of motivation in a few minutes about why we are doing this, I'd like to talk a little bit about the context and the background of the vegetation parameters. So, as Amina already said, that essential climate variables, those are ones that are they're defined as essential for understanding the climate, but also cost effective and feasible to actually obtain data sets from. And there are 36 of those that you can actually estimate with satellite data, and 27 that ESA CCI is supporting in generating. And today, this webinar is about two of those. So in the biosphere, the leaf area index and fraction of absorbed photosynthetic active radiation. So then briefly, why we talk about vegetation. So vegetation has an important role in the climate system. First of all, because it's actually, here's a photo of chloroplasts inside the plant cell. And those are the perfect solar panels. So they are actually able to transform solar energy into chemically fixed energy. So that is what actually all human and also all life on Earth is actually using as metabolic energy. But also they fix carbon. So the point is that here I show a study of, it's already 16 years old, where Stephen Sitch did an analysis of climate or different land surface models and with the same drivers. And you can see that there is a big difference in between those models, among those models, in how much carbon they predict that will be stored by the terrestrial biosphere. Even though those models are built upon the same kind of established knowledge. And that is because there are some small differences in how those models represent the vegetation responses. And with such a divergence, it's clear that what we need is more observational constraints on these models. There's also a big impact of vegetation on the water cycle. Basically, through uptake of roots and evaporation, they distribute water over the planet. And without vascular plants, there would be much less water going deep into the continents. So in this study, you see how the vegetation plays a role in recycling moisture from rainfall to back to evaporation and back to new rainfall. The third important aspect of vegetation is an energy cycle. So plants, they change the radiation budget of the Earth's surface through their reflectance and the thermal properties, but also the exchange of energy between the surface and the atmosphere. So the sensible heat flux and the latent heat flux, the energy that goes into evaporation and that is later released during condensation. This also vegetation transports the energy more over the planet. So a study by Greg Duvillier using satellite data shows here that you can see that land cover changes if you go from one vegetation type to the other, that there are substantial changes in the surface energy balance. So we also have seen in greenness indices data that there are shifts in the phenology of plants. So the start and the end of the season, especially in the northern hemisphere, you see earlier start of the season and often also a higher peak in greenness at the mid-season. But such trend also can have a legacy or propagating effects in other components of the cycles. And here I show just one example. This is a study by Anna Bastos. She used the models for this, where you can see that an earlier season in 2000, in this case we took the example of drought in 2018, an early start of the spring can propagate into actually influence the mid-season water availability in the summer. So you have seen that there are two essential climate variables defined. Leaf area index, that's actually the surface of the one-sided surface area of the foliage, the leaves in the plant. So it's a measure for the plant density. And also the fraction of absorbed photosynthetic active radiation. That is a proportion, so something between 0 and 1. And it is it's really the proportion of light between 400 and 700 nanometers that is used that is actually absorbed by those green leaves. So that is more a measure for the functioning of the vegetation. And both of these are actually, it's possible for those to estimate them with remote sensing. So if you then look at how these two properties are used in models, if you go and dive a bit more into the code of these models, you'll find quite a number of places where they appear in those models for a number of processes. So first of all, it's rainfall interception, light interception, also transpiration, roughness of the surface, and growth and allocation of energy that is harvested into organs of the plant. Similar with photosynthetic active radiation that is absorbed, that is used for the surface and radiation balance and also in photosynthesis. So in our study, we also looked at albedo. So of course, these vegetation structure also relates to how much light is reflected, which is also a very important component of climate models, and some other aspects that are a bit closer to the functioning of the vegetation. So after absorption of light, we can differentiate between how much is absorbed by different pigments, in this case chlorophyll and carotenoids. And another new signal is solar-induced fluorescence. This is light emitted by the plant after absorption. So these are also relevant for plant functioning. So if you know that vegetation plays indeed an important role in the climate, but when we started the project, we got the question also, there are already a few products also for leaf area index and FPAR. So why do we need a new product? So this is what we have, where we have a good answer to, and I'm going to show you in the remainder of the webinar what we have done. But let me first introduce the team that we have been working with. So it's really a team with complementary expertise. And these are the components of what we, basically the activities that we have been doing. There we have in the management and the pre-processing and the system, so the servers and so on, is managed by Vito. Then there are two companies involved in the algorithm, Fastop in Germany and Helios in France. Fastop is responsible for the vegetation retrieval and Helios for the atmospheric correction. Then an independent validation by Spanish company Eolab. And finally, there's me also, as a science lead, but also for user interaction, and two groups doing applications with the data. Finally, the technical officer, Marine Dudoy. So when we started the project, I was doing a user requirement study and actually also asking some open questions about what people think important about these data sets. And here's a list of existing products that people have been using. And then there's one thing that maybe people had several comments about it. None of them is perfect. So what they notice is that products that they diverge. So you may have one product will not give you the same values or the same patterns even as the other product. There's some discontinuities, values incorrect, and noise. So we thought about that, and one of the things you see here is that these products, they are sensor specific. In the last more or less 15 years, we have seen a big increase in number of available sensors. So nowadays it is much more meaningful to derive sensors based on multiple, or products based on multiple sensors, just because the availability of data is so much more, to take benefit of that. Then the other thing that where we could improve is here the way that the methods that are used to derive these products. So you will see in that list there's either a neural network or other machine learning algorithms, or a lookup table from radiative transfer models. On this aspect, we have made some innovation. We thought that for a joint sensor, we also need a different approach for retrieval. So our approach has been to use joint sensor and physically based approach. So that when you use multiple sensors, you have a higher chance of seeing cloud-free conditions. And this is quite important because for the products, we rely on seeing the vegetation basically on cloud-free conditions. And that is problematic in some parts of the world. And the more data you have, the higher the chance that you have good observations without clouds. The other aspects that we emphasize is that different sensors, they view the vegetation literally from different perspectives. So different viewing and illumination angles and different spectral bands. So not to see that as a nuisance, but as actually a source of information. That is what we aimed for. And also with by using physically based approach, we were able to quantify uncertainty and to be basically very transparent. It's not a black box model. So how the retrieval works, you see as an example here a vegetation spectrum, as in the, and also a soil reflectance spectrum, and they're really different. And based on the reflectance of the combination of bands, we are able to say something about the density of the foliage and the absorbed radiation. If you look then at the year 25 years ago, there was quite limited band information available. If you look now in this time, actually this was in 2020, you see that there is by combined sensors, there is a lot of spectral information available over the whole spectral range. Also, what we find is that the use of multiple data is a big advantage for the data completeness. This is an example for a site in Germany in 2017. There was quite a cloudy in Germany. And in the top figure, you see the time series of our first dataset that we produced. That first dataset was still single sensor. And in the bottom, you see the dataset that I will discuss now, which is the second dataset, joint sensor approach. And you see that there is less noise, less spikes up and down, and also a overall lower uncertainty of the dataset. If you then look at the tropical rainforest, that's even more dramatic. So if you look at the top graph, it's again the first monosensor dataset. You have only a few data points over the year. Well, if you look at the second dataset, you are starting to see the seasonal cycle of the vegetation despite the cloudiness. Let me briefly go through the datasets that the project will produce. So in fact, here you see the fleet of sensors from ESA on the left and NASA on the right. And in the bottom, you see sensors from Belgium sensors. And so the ones in circle are the ones that we have been using. Those are data that are available in the period of, so they've been launched before 2020, in the period that we are producing our data set. And in each data set, we make a selection of those available sensors. All of the data that we produce have or most, we also have another one at 300 meter, but at least 1 kilometer resolution at the equator. All of them are 5-day interval for the period of 2000 to 2020, except for the fluorescence data set, which will be shorter. And then we produce tiles, maps, and also time series for sites. So if we look at the first data set, which was published in 2024, it's a 1 kilometer data set, and it makes use only of spot vegetation and proba-V, which are sequential sensors. And the geographical area is shown below. So it's not the whole of the world, but it's a north-south transect that at least crosses all ecosystems from tropical rainforest to Arctic, as well as a list of bit more than 1,000 sites distributed over the world. The second data set that I'm going to show you here is a little bit wider in geographical area. You see that in Europe there are more areas a bit bigger, but what's more important is that there are more sensors included. The third data set that we are now working on will be quite similar to the second data set, with some small improvements. But the main difference is that this one will be global. The only thing that is excluded is the Arctic zones, or the top row of tiles, and Antarctica and Antarctica. And tiles with no land at all will also be excluded. Then there will be a data set that includes solar-induced fluorescence. This data set will have a few additional products. So in this data set, solar-induced fluorescence is also used to better constrain the two products, leaf area index and FBAR, but there will also be additional products related to fluorescence in this data set. Then we are working on a 300 meter data set, which will also be a transect. And so additional tiles compared to the second data set. And for this, we will use more also additional sensors, NIRIS and MODIS. And then you will see the last data set, which is a global data set again, but with also the sensors, additional sensors that we are also using for the 300 meter data set. So the data set, the second data set that is just released here, you can see an overview of the sensors that are used sequentially over time. So in the beginning, it is still monosensor because there are not enough sensors available. And as the time series increased, there are more sensors included in the data set. So the algorithm, basically the algorithm development consists of 3 steps. You are preparing input data, so that is done basically by Vito. Then there's atmospheric correction, and finally there is the inversion, or basically the retrieval of the data products, which is done by FastOpt. And we are only using a small part of the electromagnetic spectrum, that is the reflected solar light and the fluorescence. So the main vehicle there is OptiSail. OptiSail is actually a radiative transfer model, a combination of radiative transfer models for the leaf and the whole canopy stand. For the leaf, it's the model Prospect by Stefan Jacquemout, and for the vegetation canopy, it is the sail model by Wout Verhoef. Then there is a thin cloud model, snow model, and the soil reflectance model. So this model has some limitations, that it is providing effective leaf area index that is slightly lower than the true leaf area index. The model cannot represent very complex vegetation structures, and in complex vegetation structures, the leaf area is higher than what the model would expect. And this is a limitation of our dataset, because some users, they really want a true leaf area index. And this is something that we are also working on to provide a tool to make a correction for this afterwards. It's important to mention that the way that we do the retrieval is quite different from what other algorithms have been doing. So basically what the model does, or what the algorithm does, is trying to reconcile the observations and the model, trying to minimize the difference between the available observations in a time window and the model by adjusting the vegetation parameters. So it looks for a credible state that is as closest to all the available observations. That is done by defining a cost function that is minimized. What is different in our approach is the way this cost function is minimized. The traditional methods, they use lookup tables or emulators, or even a numerical differentiation of the model, but these are very slow, the numerical differentiation. So OptiSale is actually using an automatic differentiation as a mathematical technique that enables the direct inversion of the radiative transfer model. And this makes it possible to compute the to propagate uncertainties and to do this very efficiently. If you look at such a cost function, it's actually the procedure is that if you want for a certain time step, the vegetation characteristics, you look for the available satellite data in a window of 5 days before or after that moment in time. And then we make a selection of the best quality data in that interval based on the proximity in time. So closer observations, they have preference. The quality of the data, mainly quality of the atmospheric correction, and also the added value of the data points. So if they're from different sensors, they will be chosen soon. And then there is another element in the cost function, that is the prior value. So we have some expectation what the value should be. So very incredible values are values that are not very logical. They will not be. They will be less likely. That's the role of a prior value. So what we use as a prior value, if there is a good observation available from the previous time step, and we mix that with a default prior, and that the weight of the value from the previous time step depends on how long the previous measurement was ago and how long it was ago, the previous measurement, and also on the variable. For example, for the atmosphere, we assume no memory at all. So the atmospheric conditions change very rapidly, but the vegetation changes slower. So for vegetation, we use, for example, 5 days of relaxation time. And that makes the time series a little bit smoother, and it will also penalize cases where there are very jumpy changes in the vegetation in the retrieved products. So let's take a look at the validation, because the validation is done by an independent team in a Spain company, and they look at a whole list of criteria to validate the data again. So completeness, spatial consistency, temporal consistency, the error, and also the stability. And there, what is leading are the requirements that are formulated by GCOS. So for the validation data, the EOLab is using 3 datasets. So one dataset provided by Copernicus ground observation data, also a dataset, direct dataset that is all upscale data to satellite resolution. Field data is upscale to satellite resolution, and also transect measurements in 1 kilometer transect data in Africa. And then there are also intercomparisons to other satellite data products. Copernicus Land Service Modeling Service, Copernicus Land Monitoring Service data, smooth data, and also Copernicus Climate Change Service data and NASA. I'm not going through the whole list of metrics, but for each of these criteria, there are metrics to evaluate how good the data are. And I'm only going to show you a few examples. So first example is how the completeness changes over time. So this is the completeness of the FPAR data. You see there plotted the missing values over time. And that depends on how you filter the data. If you don't filter the data at all, you have higher completeness, of course. But if you select only the best data and throw away the rest, you have lower completeness. What you see is that over time, from left to right, you have a higher completeness because there are fewer missing values. That has to do with the more abundant sensors, availability of data later in the time series. Here is one example of the leaf area index and the FPAR over time compared among different products and also with the data of the field data. Here it's important to differentiate that we are estimating effective leaf area index, not true leaf area index, which is a bit lower than the effective leaf area index is a bit lower than the true leaf area index. So if you look at the purple line, you see that for FPAR, the data match very well with the field data. For the leaf area index, they are lower. What you also see is that the data are pretty smooth, so not very jumpy compared to single sensor methods. They're quite jumpy. The light blue is a data set that has been smoothed. So these are not the original retrieved data, but there's already a smoothing filter gone over this data set. Now here, what I'm also showing you is the comparison with the field data as a scatter plots. And again, you see that the correlation between the measurement and field measurements and our retrieved product is pretty good. But again, you have an underestimate of the true values of the leaf area index, a bias due to the fact that our definition is different. Looking at the stability over time and interannual stability, we see that on the left graph, you have the changes between one day and the other day in absorbed radiation. Those changes should not be too abrupt. So you expect that small changes are more frequent than large changes, and this is what you see. And if you compare our smoothness to that of other data, you see that the purple line is smoother than the single sensor measurements. It's a bit less smooth than a data set that is already smooth, the blue one. And the last thing that you see on the right is that there is a slight difference in the time series in FPAR, slight change in FPAR over time, which could be related to the inclusion of new sensors. So these are small discontinuities due to the fact that the sensors are not exactly the same, that we have new sensors in the time series. This is something that we are investigating now and try to improve for the global data set, our third data set. So what I'd like to do is to show you a Jupyter notebooks. So to give you some small demo of the data set. And for that, I will stop sharing and share a different. So I mentioned that the dataset have very recently become available online. So the knowledge exchange team has already prepared a notebook for the previous dataset, by which you can quite easily access and visualize the data. So before this, in preparation of the webinar, I have also prepared a Jupyter notebook with instructions how to use the data. That was before the data were available. So before the second data set was available. So what we will do is after this webinar, merge the two notebooks so that you can actually access the second data set with the tool of that's provided by the Climate Knowledge Exchange team. With this dataset, with this notebook, I want to show you how you can download the data, how you can visualize them and do a few processing steps. A good thing is to use the Climate Data Toolbox, because with the Climate Data Toolbox, you don't need to download whole tiles of data. You can select the area that you want to download and extract only that part that you really need. But in this book, I'm not doing using the Climate Data Toolbox yet, because as I mentioned during the preparation, this was not available yet. I can show you here, and this is something you can do even after finishing of the webinar, the area with the tile numbers. And you can select the area that you're interested in. And I'm specifying that here, the tile number, and then specifying the location where I have stored the data. Then let me show you that here inside you can very easily see, you can actually show what is inside the file, even without downloading the data themselves. You can see the dimensions, time, latitude, longitude, and the number of bands or number of data layers. Then you can show the variables inside that are available inside the file. I like to show you. Then if you then load a whole, if you load one full tile and you would plot them, you get something like this. What I've done here is downloading the data of two dates in different years, 2017 and 2018. 2018 there was a drought in the north of Europe. Well, 2017 there was not. So with this plot, you can make easily a plot of the 2 years and also the difference, where you can see here the lower values for FPAR in 2018 in the north of Europe compared to 2017. Then one important that we found also as feedback in our first data set is how to use the quality flag. Now, the quality flag gives a lot of information about the data quality and also how good was the fit between the measurement and the observations. And with that, you can actually flag out data that you may not want to have included in your data set. There's one recommended, so that to use the data that are to filter out the data that may not be trusted because they were not so close to the observations, or there was not much information in the measurements. If you do that, you plot all the data. You can also filter for the trusted. You see most of the data are trusted anyway, so there's not a big difference between the left and the right. between the left and the middle. You can also filter for only the very best quality. Then you lose quite some data. You may also lose some data that are actually still quite good. So that you should only do if you really don't mind losing data, but you really want only data points that you are very sure that that are of the highest quality. Now the data are 1 kilometer resolution. For some application that is maybe too fine, because maybe you want for climate research, you want to have them at 10 kilometer resolution, then you can do spatial aggregation. So in this toolbox also there is an example of how you can actually resample the data using actually a weighting with the variance. So the data that have higher uncertainty, they count less in the mean, and then you could make a map of the. You can make produce the data at a coarser spatial resolution. The next example I have taken is an area that was affected by quite a severe fire in 2017. In Portugal and Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula, there were fires in 2017. And if you know exactly the coordinates, select a smaller area, then you could select the whole time series of this small area. So here is a smaller map, latitude and longitude before and after the fire. The black parts here are actually fire marks, burn scars where the vegetation has disappeared between May and June and July 2017. Now you could make time series plots of the vegetation during this period. So here are the 3 years before the fire. That's the fire event, a sudden drop of the vegetation, and a slow gradual recovery. That's visible in the fraction absorbed radiation, but also in the leaf area index. And now you could make the example to separate that per year to show the seasonal cycle of 2017, the year with the fire, and the years after. And you can clearly see the recovery. Now you can even on the time series, you could select with the filter, you could select all the data. You see them here plotted. Basically, they're plotted in blue, and then on top, plotting the data that are trusted in orange, and the best, very best in green that overlap. So when you do the filtering, you may filter out a few of the data spikes that are not necessarily trusted. Then another step that you could do, some people need smoother time series because you still see some up and down that is inherent to observations. So you may have still some variation in time that you may want to filter out. For that purpose, I have introduced here a time series smoothing filter, providing the code, and then you could filter. You could actually fit a smooth curve through the data. When you do that, you may, because depending on how many harmonics you choose, you may slightly miss the event, or not really miss the event, but miss the timing of the event. Okay. Let me share once more the presentation. You'll be able to view those notebooks later on and play with the data. Just for you to take home, the take-home message is that we have a very innovative algorithm, joint sensor approach with uncertainty covariance and flags provided. So the dataset is not perfect, but CLDP2, the second dataset, is ready for scientific use. And there is more in the making. It will become available in the coming year. And I hope that the notebooks, that they will help you to provide easy access and to start working with the data. So thank you for your attention. And with that, I'm ready to take questions.
Thank you so much, Christiaan, for this very detailed and interesting talk, and also for providing all these materials. I'm sure this will be very useful. Again, we will send the presentation to participants, and all the links are in the chat right now. We can send them again. Actually, it's good that you showed this example of the use of the vegetation parameters for the protocol wildfire. It's good to see application for climate extreme events. And I would also like to take this opportunity to say that we have a keynote talk on the wildfires event happening this Friday as part of a GESTM conference, which is scheduled at 2:30. So if you're interested, you can watch this keynote speech. But going back to your very interesting talk on vegetation parameters, I'm reading the questions right now, and there's a lot of questions linked to datasets, including a question related to the time duration, and whether these datasets are available for commercial use cases. And the second part is that you showed it was available until 2020, and will it be available after 2020?
Okay, so I got already two questions written down. First is the commercial use, or if it's open for commercial use.
Yes.
Yes, these data are open, so you can use them. You just reference to the product user guide at the moment until we have a publication out. I mean, a scientific publication describing the data. We are still working on that, but until then, you can refer to the product user guide that's on our website. And then the data are available for use also for commercial use, as long as the dataset itself is not claimed. So the dataset remains open and free for everyone. So there is an ESA license on that. The other question is data after 2020. So there's a different project. So the C3S, I already mentioned it as one of the reference data sets in the presentation. That is also ongoing right now. And there the same algorithm is used. So that will be also made available, also near real time, but not inside this project, so not in the ESA CCI. So the ESA CCI is really for historic climatological time series. The recent data will be available, but in the Copernicus global and in the Copernicus services. So by this, also led by Vito, the same as manager of this project.
Great, thanks for the clarification. There's a question on the use of sensors to produce the data. So particularly, which joint sensors do you use and how do you know which one to use? And then there's a second part of the question, which I will read after you answer that part.
Okay, the question is which sensors we are...
How do you know which sensors to use,
how do we know?
Which joint sensors to use also?
Yeah, so the sensor selection, basically we are in a certain spectral range, that's for sure, that we are looking for, so visible and the infrared, because the model is sensitive vegetation. These bands are sensitive to the vegetation. So if they're included. So the other thing that these data must be available, and there must be also an uncertainty associated. So we must trust that the data are correct and that the uncertainty is provided of the data set. So basically, we consider all the available publicly available sensors in the algorithm, and then we build it up gradually. So we started with data that are available at more or less the same spatial resolution, 1 kilometer. And then for the 300 meter, we also used a bit higher spatial resolution sensors, mirrors and MODIS. So we do them, we added them not one by one, basically, until we have basically most of the available information in it.
And the person was also asking if it was possible to do a historical retrieval to review changes over a larger period of time. So I imagine before 2000.
Yeah, so it could be yeah, before 2000. The point is that we also rely on the we need to rely on the quality of the consistency of the data in that period. And I know that ESA has also a project that is heritage missions, where they are busy looking at and making available time series of historic missions together with their uncertainty. So once these are available, we could go further back in time, but we don't have the resources now to do that in this project. But it's something that we have discussed.
There's a question about the processing. So what is the post-processing pipeline that is used to smooth the time series? And can you explain it? Can you explain it a bit more explicitly?
Yeah, so basically we don't smooth the time series ourselves. The only sort a little bit of smoothing that occurs is inside the algorithm, where we look at the as a starting point prior value, we use the previous retrieval. So if there was 5 days ago, there was a good measurement, then that is weighted in with in the retrieval of the next step. That makes it a little bit smoother. But we don't do any smoothing on purpose, because you can never unsmooth the data afterwards. Once you smooth it, you lose the original. So we want to stay close to the observations. But what I showed in the notebook is a very simple tool to do your own smoothing. And then you can actually choose with the parameter how smooth you want it. So there's one parameter, if you change the value, you will get rid of more and more spikes until you have a complete flat line, and anything in between. So it's really up to the user. So we try to make that user friendly, but we don't want to smooth the data, because we may lose interesting events, like, for example, cutting of the forest, or storm, or fire, or harvest. These kind of events we really want to see in the data and not get rid of. Is that answering? Yeah, of course, it's written, the question.
Yes. So there's one last question. What is the performance gain of using TOA signal compared to using surface reflectance?
The gain of using TOA. Okay,
Yes.
so in fact, we are starting with TOA, and then we do atmospheric correction. And then and that atmospheric correction is really necessary, because atmosphere has quite an effect on the reflectance. So we must consider that. So now it is done in 2 steps. There's also a way to do one-step retrieval, where you do both the atmosphere and the vegetation in one go, in one algorithm. This is something that we also consider. We don't do that in this project, but it is a very interesting alternative way, where we also see benefit of to do it in that way. But basically, we are not starting from in the project. We don't start from bottom of atmosphere reflectance, because we need to consider the uncertainty. We need to know exactly the uncertainty. So by doing it ourselves, from the top of atmosphere, we get the uncertainty information from the data provider directly, and then we can propagate that into the final product. So we can consider also the uncertainty introduced by the atmospheric correction in this way.
Great. Thank you so much for answering all of these questions. And I think we've covered all of them, so we're going to close the session now. And I would like to thank you again all for attending, and thank you, Christiaan, for the great talk. And just before you leave, I would like to share the information of the next webinar. As I said, it's a recurring monthly series. And for the next one, we will be talking about the land surface temperature CCI dataset. For this, we will be joined by Abigail Waring, who's working at the National Centre for Earth Observation in the UK. And she will be talking about how this LST dataset is generated and some of the application that it can have for climate change applications. So the details for signing up will be coming soon on the website. And again, thank you so much for your attention. And thank you, Christiaan, for the amazing talk and all of the material.
Thank you, Amina.